John Boehner apparently got his hands around a Merlot bottle today and actually yesterday and wrote an op-ed piece for the Wall Street Journal. And he is blaming Obama for the 1.2 trillion in across-the-board spending cuts set to go into effect next month. He says that the looming cuts are what he calls the president's sequester. You know, what a dumb son of a bitch. I mean, really, is he not a dumb son of a bitch? Somebody ought to tell Boehner that spending has to arise in the House, not in the Oval Office. And all budgetary issues have to arise in the U.S. House of Representatives. Doesn't he know that? And doesn't he also understand that the sequester comes from this piece of garbage called the Budget Control Act of 2011, which everybody signed off on, mandated the cuts if a congressional supercommittee failed to reach an agreement on how to reduce the deficit. And reducing the deficit is the most asinine thing being prioritized probably in the history of this republic where it concerns budgetary issues. Paul Krugman has said over and over and over again, and nobody in that circle jerk that is the executive branch or the legislative branch is paying attention. Nobody is. The deficit doesn't mean anything. You want to wipe out the deficit? It can be done tomorrow. There'll be a little bit of inflation maybe, but oh, God, I get so sick of it. Let's go to Prairie 2. Subject line, there goes one, stomp, stomp, squish. Oh, God. The stock markets were down sharply today on the release of the latest Federal Reserve Board minutes that suggest they are losing their consensus on the continued priming of more money to plump up the bond markets. Oh, Prairie 2, I hate talking about the bond markets. The Fed has been pumping out $85 billion a month in the effort to hold deflation at bay. Not inflation, deflation. The math on what they've been doing is that this is roughly equal to a quarter of the federal government's budget. Not that the taxpayer is funding this. The Fed just prints it. Or rather, they move electrons around in some computers to buy bonds from rich people and institutions so they can show a profit and reinvest. The worry isn't over the fact that if the Federal Reserve is doing this. The panic is over the idea that they might stop. You can't let go of the tiger's tail until he's really, really tired. A lot of people on the right think we're just annoying the tiger. If we only let go, he'll be a good kitty and lick our hand. Does Kitty want sauce with his finger snacks? Senator Elizabeth Warren has just started holding her first hearings into the ongoing criminal conspiracy known as Wall Street banking. Needless to say, she's not happy with the Obama administration's lack of prosecution, although she does acknowledge the lack of resources, thanks to the Republicans. Feet are being held to the fire just the same. With the Dow close to 14,000, the average company now is valued at more than double its book value. That is what its assets are really worth if they were sold off. Not so with Wall Street banks. Their stock value is far below book value despite their tendency to make huge profits. That is, except for the occasional crash, of course. But even then, they didn't stop making money, at least on paper. That's the rub. It's just paper. A recent analysis of Wells Fargo Bank shows that the vast majority of the assets on their books are securities like derivatives and mortgage-backed securities, which aren't really traded on any sort of competitive market. This means the bank is forced to estimate the value of these so-called assets. If you take the worst-case scenario, or what some of us call reality, the big Wall Street banks put the bank in bankrupt. I haven't heard from the gold bugs lately. They were so dismissive of my suggestion that buying gold was like chasing the end of the rainbow, as in, don't expect any return on your money. The gold bugs seem to be skittering for the refrigerator now that the lights have come on. George Soros got rid of much of his gold investment in 2011 and is now dumping the remaining instruments like so much ballast from a sinking hot air balloon. The gold market has dropped another $90 an ounce, in the past week and maybe headed for the cliff. The U.S. dollar is suddenly en vogue again as investors must cover margin calls. This is driving down most commodities besides gold. Oil has dropped sharply, but don't expect gasoline to come down until Wall Street has sold a sizable number of derivatives to the actual users of petroleum products. Remember what I wrote earlier about the Wall Street banks' assets being heavily made up of derivatives? Wild price swings is how they get Main Street to buy them in order to buy protection from bankruptcy. Hey, nice store windows you got there, mister. You're referring to the protection racket, right? And speculators also use them to gamble on those same price swings, like any casino. Lots of little guys lose big. Now, according to the political right in this country, this is like a crazy, out-of-control, natural phenomenon, like another superstorm that the right has no responsibility for. Senator Elizabeth Warren knows better. Roughly 100 members of the Progressive Caucus in Congress know better. Roll back Reaganomics, roll back everything the Republicans have done since 1947. All we need to do is actually make things work for America instead of for the transnational billionaires. Prairie2.com. Stomp, stomp, squish. Boy, the game just goes on, doesn't it? I used to think that there was some kind of intrinsic value to the American economy, the overall economy, by the numbers on the New York Stock Exchange. And, you know, once they crash through, what is it, 15,000? I mean, oh, my God! But who benefits? Who's benefiting? Are you, True Seeker? Remember, you used to have a 401k, right? You used to have mutual funds as a result of your 401k, didn't you? I mean, I did at one time when I worked for WSB Radio. Oh, my God. I would, whatever I put in, Cox Communications would match $1 for every 10. I forget what it was. But those are the good old days. That wasn't that long ago. That was back in the mid-90s. Do you remember those 401ks where your employer actually made a contribution along with you? I forget what the split was. I don't think it was 10-1. I forget what it was. But when you look at the stock market, I guess we're all supposed to go, whoa, well, how could things be so horrible? As if. Right? Stock market, my ass. So anyway, John Boehner says this is the president's sequester. Boehner wrote in his Wall Street Journal op-ed, or somebody wrote it for him. Boehner can't write. But he, under his byline, it said, most Americans are just hearing about this Washington creation for the first time, the sequester. What they might not realize from Mr. Obama's statements is that it is a product of the president's own failed leadership. Boehner goes on, there's nothing wrong with cutting spending that much. We should be cutting even more, but the sequester is an ugly and dangerous way to do it. Oh, God. Now, remember, it was a bipartisan group that came up with this madness. And the spending, the cuts to defense and domestic spending would go into effect in January 2013, and then the sequester was delayed to begin March 1st. That was part of the so-called fiscal cliff negotiations. Aren't these Republican swine? Aren't they? I mean, when are we going to hold them accountable? Oh, please. In the op-ed, Boehner slams the president for not offering, quote, a detailed plan that can pass Congress. There you go. The key word in there is pass, right? Boehner writes, as the president's outrage about the sequester grows in the coming days, Republicans have a simple response. Mr. President, we agree that your sequester is bad policy. What spending are you willing to cut to replace it? All right, now can I go get a goddamn drink? What time is it? What time? What time is it in London? I don't care what time it is here. Are you crazy?